In the dense interior of the northwest jungle of Guyana, far from paved roads and distant from the reach of ordinary oversight, more than 900 people died in a single day. The settlement where it happened had been built deliberately in isolation. Wooden structures stood among thick vegetation. Loudspeakers hung from poles. Agricultural fields surrounded a central pavilion. What appeared on paper as a cooperative community was, by late 1978, a closed system controlled from its center. The events that unfolded there were not sudden. They were the result of a process that began decades earlier, thousands of miles away, and developed through a sequence of documented decisions and movements that steadily narrowed the options of those involved. James Warren Jones was born in rural Indiana during the Great Depression. His early years were shaped by economic hardship and frequent moves. As a child, he spent long periods alone and developed an intense interest in religion and public speaking. He attended various churches and observed different styles of worship. By his teenage years, he was already delivering informal sermons to small groups. In the early 1950s, Jones began working with religious congregations in Indianapolis. This period coincided with heightened racial segregation across the United States and growing tension surrounding civil rights. Jones presented himself as a preacher committed to racial integration and social equality, messages that attracted individuals who felt excluded from mainstream institutions. In 1955, Jones formally established a church that would later become known as the People's Temple. The organization emphasized interracial worship, collective responsibility, and communal support. Temple members participated in food distribution programs, assistance for the elderly, and housing support for low-income families. These activities were visible and documented, helping the temple build a reputation as a socially engaged organization. Jones's role within the group expanded beyond preaching. He became the central authority figure, overseeing finances, housing arrangements, and daily schedules for many members. By the late 1950s, Jones began expressing fears related to nuclear war and global collapse. He studied civil defense materials and searched for locations he believed would be safer in the event of a major conflict. In 1960, his appointment to the Indianapolis Human Rights Commission increased his public standing and reinforced the perception of legitimacy surrounding the People's Temple. At the same time, Jones intensified his influence within the organization, encouraging members to donate assets and commit more fully to communal living.
In the early 1960s, Jones relocated the core of the People's Temple to California. The move was presented as a strategic decision aligned with the temple's values and long-term safety. New congregations were established in Northern California, including Ukiah, followed by expansion into San Francisco and Los Angeles. Membership increased significantly. The temple attracted people from diverse racial backgrounds, including many who had experienced poverty or discrimination. Public events highlighted the temple's charitable work and political engagement. Jones cultivated relationships with local officials and activists, positioning the organization as both a religious and social force. Throughout the late 1960s and early 1970s, internal practices within the People's Temple became increasingly structured and demanding. Members attended long meetings that reinforced loyalty and collective discipline. Communal living arrangements were expanded, income was pooled, and personal autonomy was reduced. Jones framed these measures as necessary protections against external hostility and social injustice. Externally, the temple continued to receive positive attention for its political mobilization and social programs. Internally, dissent became harder to express without consequences. By the mid-1970s, reports from former members and concerned relatives began to reach journalists and authorities. Allegations included financial exploitation, harsh disciplinary practices, and restrictions on personal freedom. Media investigations intensified. In response, Jones portrayed the scrutiny as persecution driven by political enemies. He warned followers that hostile forces were attempting to dismantle the community. These claims were used to justify further isolation and consolidation of control. In 1977, as negative press coverage increased, Jones accelerated plans to relocate members outside the United States. The destination chosen was Guyana, a small English-speaking country in South America with a government that maintained diplomatic openness to socialist projects. The People's Temple had already acquired land in a remote region of Guyana's northwest interior. The location was accessible only by air or long river travel. It was there that the settlement known as Jonestown was established. Early groups of temple members traveled to Guyana to prepare the site. They cleared dense jungle, constructed basic housing, and planted crops intended to sustain the population. Conditions were difficult. The climate was hot and humid. Medical resources were limited. Despite these challenges, progress reports sent back to the United States emphasized productivity and unity. Later in 1977, Jones himself relocated to Jonestown along with hundreds of followers. Once there, daily life became highly regulated. Work assignments were mandatory. Food distribution was centrally controlled. Public announcements and speeches were broadcast continuously over loudspeakers. Communication with the outside world was restricted. Letters were monitored. Travel required authorization that was rarely granted. Jones repeatedly warned residents that leaving Jonestown would expose them to danger or imprisonment. Physical exhaustion and illness became common. Visitors, when allowed, were shown a carefully managed version of the settlement that emphasized cooperation and satisfaction. Behind this presentation, complaints accumulated quietly among residents who felt trapped. In the United States, families of temple members continued to press for intervention. They reported receiving alarming messages or no communication at all. These concerns eventually led to official attention. In November 1978, a congressional delegation led by Representative Leo Ryan traveled to Guyana to investigate conditions at Jonestown. Journalists and relatives accompanied the group. Their arrival marked the first sustained external scrutiny of the settlement since Jones' relocation. The delegation was welcomed at Jonestown and attended a planned gathering that included speeches and performances designed to demonstrate stability. During the visit, some residents discreetly passed notes to members of the delegation expressing fear and requesting assistance to leave. These requests indicated that conditions differed from the image presented publicly. The following day, arrangements were made for those who wished to depart with the delegation to travel to a nearby airstrip. As the group prepared to leave, tension escalated rapidly. Jones appeared increasingly agitated by the prospect of defections. When the delegation reached the airstrip, armed members of the People's Temple arrived unexpectedly. Gunfire erupted. Representative Ryan was killed, along with several journalists and temple members. Others were wounded. The attackers then departed, returning to Jonestown. News of the shootings spread quickly within the settlement. Jones gathered the remaining residents at the central pavilion. He announced that violence had occurred and asserted that retaliation was inevitable. Large containers of a flavored drink mixed with cyanide and sedatives had been prepared in advance. Under Jones's direction, the distribution began. Children were administered the poison first, followed by adults. Armed guards surrounded the area. Within minutes, people collapsed where they stood or sat.
The process continued until silence spread across the settlement.
When authorities later reached the site, they encountered rows of bodies surrounding the pavilion and scattered through nearby areas. Infants, children, adults, and elderly residents lay together, many still holding cups or syringes used to administer the poison. The scale of death was immediately apparent. More than 900 people had died, making it one of the largest single incidents of civilian loss of life in modern history not caused by natural disaster. Jones himself was found near the pavilion with a gunshot wound to the head. The circumstances of his death were never definitively established. Guyana's government requested international assistance to manage the aftermath. Recovery teams faced logistical challenges due to the remoteness of the settlement and the number of bodies. The process of identification was slow. Many victims were buried initially in mass graves before later being exhumed and returned to the United States for further examination. Autopsies confirmed cyanide poisoning as the primary cause of death in most cases, though injection marks suggested that not all victims consumed the substance voluntarily. In the days that followed, investigators began piecing together the final hours of Jonestown using survivor accounts, recordings recovered from the site, and documentation maintained by the People's Temple. Audio tapes captured portions of the gathering at the pavilion, including Jones' statements and the sounds of distress as the poison took effect. These recordings became central evidence in understanding the sequence of events. Survivors described confusion, fear, and the presence of armed guards enforcing compliance. In the United States, the deaths triggered immediate political and public reaction. Congressional hearings were convened to examine how the People's Temple had operated for so long with limited oversight. Testimony from former members, journalists, and officials highlighted failures in communication and intervention. The role of local authorities, federal agencies, and media organizations was scrutinized. Questions arose about how warnings from defectors and families had been handled, and why stronger action had not been taken earlier. Surviving members of the People's Temple who were not present in Jonestown at the time of the deaths were detained for questioning. Some had been in Georgetown, Guyana's capital, while others remained in the United States. Legal proceedings addressed issues of financial fraud, abuse, and conspiracy, though the death of Jones meant that many central decisions could not be directly adjudicated. Assets belonging to the People's Temple were seized and examined as part of the investigation. The physical site of Jonestown was eventually abandoned. Buildings deteriorated rapidly in the tropical environment. Vegetation reclaimed the cleared land. Over time, the settlement disappeared almost entirely into the surrounding jungle. For the families of those who died, the loss remained permanent. Memorial services were held, and names were inscribed on monuments commemorating the victims. The event became a reference point in discussions of extremist groups and communal control. Academic researchers, policymakers, and journalists studied the Jonestown case in the years that followed. The focus was placed on organizational structure, mechanisms of isolation, and the gradual erosion of individual autonomy. Changes were proposed in how governments monitor organizations that combine religious authority, political activism, and communal living. Media practices also shifted, with greater attention paid to early warning signs reported by former members and relatives. The phrase associated with the method used at Jonestown entered common language, often detached from its original context. For those directly affected, however, the events were not an abstract reference. They were a sequence of decisions, movements, and constraints that culminated in irreversible loss. Jonestown was not the product of a single moment, but of years of consolidation, relocation, and control that narrowed options until escape became nearly impossible. Thank you for watching this video. If you found it informative, please like the video, Subscribe to the channel for more true crime documentaries. Leave a comment to share your thoughts. Watch another video from Voices of Crime to continue exploring real cases.